so we are waiting for him to join, and he will be presenting shortly. So this webinar will be taken around 2 hours. Might be slightly more in case of questions, and it will be translated to YouTube as well. So the recorded version will be in our channel in YouTube, so you can always come back and watch it there. And yeah, so just wanted to welcome you and give a word to our first presenter. He will introduce himself and explain what he will be talking about. It's a very exciting topic. So yeah, Liu, can you try to share your screen? I guess still connection problem are there. Just let's wait for 2 more minutes. Sorry for that. Liu, are you with us? I think he got some audio issues. Let's give him 1 more minute. Otherwise, probably Neha will be able to present first. And then we will get back to Liu with his presentation, just not to hold other people here. Okay, so Neha, are you comfortable to present first, if you don't mind? And then Liu will continue after you.
Yeah, sure. That's completely okay with me, Alona.
Okay, so go ahead
and
if you can share your screen, if there is any presentation, it would be nice. Try it.
Sure.
Do we see your camera? Yes.
So, yeah, I do get a message that host disabled attendee screen sharing. Can you check?
Mr. Prashant, our admin here, can you please accept Neha to screen sharing? Just give us some time. Okay, now you can do that.
Sure.
Try it.
All right.
Yay, we see it.
So let me know once you're able to see my screen.
Yes, we do. So go ahead. It's all yours.
Sure. And this one is also visible, right? You're
yes,
able to see the
code. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay, great. So good evening, everyone. So this session today is going to be about, we're going to talk about a pathway which can help us to transition from a Java and Selenium based automation framework to Protractor and Cucumber or Protractor Jasmine automation framework. So basically in this session, I'm going to give you a glimpse of what all would be the differentiators to achieve this transition. And first of all, I would like to talk a bit about the cases, like why basically this transition would be required, or the scenario where this transition actually would be helpful. So first thing is that in current scenario, we see a lot of applications are being developed in AngularJS because of its ease of use and the cool features it provides. And a lot of Java applications are now being moved on to being developed into into this AngularJS. And because of that, since AngularJS is more of an asynchronous, it has an asynchronous way of working. In Java, in Selenium-based framework, if we try to automate an AngularJS application, what we would have to do is we would have to provide a lot of additional handling when we work on different pages of AngularJS applications because of the way it works. There are promises, so I'll briefly touch upon these points while going through this session. So the reason for this transition would be the cases wherein our applications are built are moved on to AngularJS from Java. And there are cases wherein we need to move our frameworks and transition completely from Java-based project to an AngularJS project or application. So this is going to be the background of this session. And I'm going to touch upon the items listed here. We would cover about dependency management, configuration requirements. We'll also talk about the asynchronous behavior handling, how it works well with Protractor. And TypeScript and JavaScript are the options to code in this framework. And then we'll slightly touch upon the reporting part. So the first point is about dependency management, which I would like to mention that in Java and Selenium-based projects, Maven is mainly used for dependency management. When we talk about dependency management, what we mean to say is that how we are going to get our the jars that we require to integrate with while working on our automation framework, right? So we generally do that using pom.xml in our automation frameworks, wherein we define the dependency. I can just quickly show an example. For example, if I have to, just a sec. So if, for example, I want to add a Appium dependency in my project, what I'll do is I'll just search that dependency and from Maven repository, and Maven repository holds all the packages for Java, which can be integrated with and utilized in our automation framework. So I would go ahead and use this in my pom.xml if I'm working on a Java and Selenium automation framework. Now, if I have to do similar thing in a Protractor framework, what I would require to do is, what I would be doing is I would be building a package.json. So this basically maps to the pom.xml of a Java-based framework. And as we can see that, the dependencies get listed in package.json, the way, it's very easy to use, wherein you just list down all your dependencies, and once you have them listed, you just need to run a single command to get them installed in your project and downloaded into your project. So the way Maven manages all the Java-based repositories, Node Package Manager is something which manages all the repositories for the Node.js for the Node.js libraries, basically. So NPM is the Node Package Manager, similar to Maven that we have in Java. Since I've already have all these installed, it just didn't install anything. But in one go, we can install all the required dependencies like this in package.json. So coming back to this part. So here again, this is an example of pom.xml. And in this, we just add the dependency tag when we work on Java-based project, but to transition it to Protractor framework, what you'd have to do is you would have to build this package.json. And just as a background information on this, to reach this stage of creating your package.json, you would require some basic prerequisite installations, which would include Node.js as the primary installation. You should have Node.js on your machine, and make sure that you have npm and Node.js path being set in your system environment variables. And once you're done with that, you just need to do npm install Protractor. And if you want to install it globally, you just need to add -g hyphen and -g, and then you just install it. This basically installs it globally on your machine. Right now, I'm using this Visual Studio Code IDE. It can be done from command prompt itself as well. So, so this is just a little bit of background on how we can set this up. And further, once all this Protractor and Node.js is installed on your machine, you just have to initialize the npm package manager using npm init command, and it would automatically build a very brief structure of package.json for you automatically, and then you just need to fill in your dependencies there to get it going. All right, and any questions there, please let me know, else we can move ahead to the next point.
We will ask questions at the end of the presentation, just not to interrupt you. So yeah, we can discuss. Yeah, sure.
All right, no worries. So moving on to the next part, wherein we would touch a bit about the configuration requirements. Like in Protractor and Cucumber, that framework requires you. So maybe we can call it a Protractor framework, not adding Cucumber to it right now, because there are different configuration files required in both the cases. If you are using Jasmine as your unit test framework, then it would have a separate configuration requirements. And if you're using Cucumber for testing, for building your behavioral driven test framework, then you would require a separate configuration file. So I'll just show a basic structure of configuration file. At the very least, you would require your Selenium address to be provided and the name of your script. So basically, configuration file in Protractor framework is it actually controls the execution flow, and as well the scripts that you want to execute as part of that particular set. So if you want to include sanity or regression scripts, you can accordingly add in your configuration file. And setting this up is very straightforward. Once you have the Protractor and your package on everything set up, what you need to do is you would have to set up this configuration file and just run it with the spec name. And the command to do that is, let me just show you. Seems my terminal is, it has hung. So I'm trying to restart it. Okay, so anyways, it seems there is some trouble for it to come back up. Okay, so how you can do is, once you set up this configuration.js, what simply you need to do is you need to pass a command Protractor and the configuration.js. Once you do that, it will run all the specs that you have listed there. Maybe I'll just reopen this, and yeah, we're good now. So it's back up. So I'll simply pass the command Protractor configuration. Yes. Now this way, oops, it seems it's lost something. Let me just, install Protractor again. Okay. Okay. I also wanted to show you this npm init command. So I've just quickly run it to show you how easy it is to build your package.json. So since my package.json already existed and it had all this structure, otherwise what it would do is it would create a blank structure for you. And from here, what you do is you just install all the dependencies in one go. Afterwards, once this is done, all right, I think one more thing I wanted to inform was about starting your WebDriver manager. So once you have your Protractor installed, I'm doing it again because it seems there's some issue with the Protractor that I was working on that got delinked somehow. So I'm going to install it again. And what I'm going to do next is start my WebDriver manager, because that's the next step once you want to interact with this Selenium address that you've mentioned here, right? So you need to bring that server up. And I would also suggest that going through the official documentation, you would find a lot of help there in the Protractor official documentation. And yes, so this basically gives you a lot of steps, brief steps, which help you get started easily. And once you've seen this demo, these you would be able to relate to all these steps, as you can see that we've already run this command. Something is, I think there's some issue maybe with my network that's not able to install it. Anyways, so we'll move ahead and yeah. And I'll now show you the configuration file for Cucumber, because for Protractor, Jasmine framework, this is as much you would require as a basic structure for your configuration file. And in case of Cucumber, there will be a lot of other information that you would need to pass on, because Cucumber framework has features, specs, and definition files. And you need to pass that information to your configuration file in order to get it working. And this is one sample Cucumber config file that you can see here, wherein you can also define that on completion of your test, what in what format you want that report to be. And towards the end, I'll show you the kind of report Cucumber generates, which is very much readable and and the tests are also very much readable in Cucumber, because they are more of written in a way which is in English statements like given, when, then, and you write English simple statements which define your steps of execution. All right. So this is one major change. Another major change you would have to cater to once you move from Java-based framework to a Protractor framework. As in terms of repository management, as far as this is involved, this pretty much stays the same. It is up to you how you want to manage it, both in Java or Protractor framework. Because so here what I've shown is two screenshots which are clubbed together. The upper one is showing you the way you can manage your test data, and the one which is below is showing you how you can manage your locators. And right now I have used properties file for both of these cases. It's up to you whatever you want to use for Protractor framework. So it stays same. I mean, whatever you were using in your Java framework can be directly utilized in your Protractor framework. So not much change there. In terms of handling, definitely Protractor would make your life far easier when you are automating AngularJS applications. It's not that Selenium doesn't handle it, but Selenium would require a lot of manual handling of your Ajax and Angular weights, wherein there might be cases wherein the handling part would also require some explicit weights to be added, because the way Protractor works in the background, it basically requires a lot of synchronization when you are automating those pages. And how Protractor makes it easy for you is that it adds, using async and await. These are the two keywords, as you can see in the example shown in the screenshot here, that async await basically uh, removes all the complexity for you, and simply using these two keywords you can run through your flow in a synchronous way, that is going one step after the other, because otherwise, if you run your flow without adding these keywords, your flow would not go in a system, in an organized way. It will actually not be able to run the steps in orderly fashion. So Protractor very much provides this functionality, since, and the reason behind this is that Protractor is being written by AngularJS team itself. Developers who've created this AngularJS technology, they built this particular Protractor framework for their testing purpose, and that has been published for use as well. And that's the reason that it provides such a strong hand-holding for handling all the synchronization related issues. Another thing that I would like you to know about working with Protractor framework is that you are free to use TypeScript or JavaScript. So based on your comfort level, because, and also the way you write code, you can either use JavaScript or TypeScript, and it basically, the way TypeScript works is it actually gives you more control and more a similarity to the way you write your Java code, uh, because JavaScript is it does have classes, and you can actually work on classes in JavaScript as well. But TypeScript, it actually has a syntax which is very similar to the lines of Java. So TypeScript is basically, what I have seen is that it seems to be a better approach of writing your code, a cleaner code and a concise code as compared to JavaScript, because JavaScript has a lot of complex code modules. Otherwise, if you want to bring in your class concept in your automation code. And one basic prerequisite that you would need to meet to utilize TypeScript in your automation framework is that you would require a tsconfig.json file, which is basically your a root file, which actually resides in a TypeScript project, and it helps to define the compiler options. As you can see, the target ES6 here, it mentions the JavaScript version that it supports, and then you also define where you want all these files to be compiled. So what happens is that the TypeScript compiler basically converts all your TypeScript files into JavaScript, and actually JavaScript itself is executed at the background. But the way you write your code, it becomes easier for you, and it helps you to write very concise code. So I personally like TypeScript more, and use that in my automation frameworks. And here you can see that a file, that screenshot, and you can relate to it, that here, the directory that you would specify here, all your TypeScript code files would get, they would be output into this particular directory once they are compiled back into JavaScript. So this is one prerequisite you would have to meet to get your TypeScript code working. And again, I would guide you towards the official documentation for TypeScript, and it pretty much you would be able to relate to this um, once you go through this documentation, and you can connect it very well from this session as well. So moving on to the next and the last point, which is about reporting. As I mentioned, that reporting in Cucumber is very much readable. I'm not sure if you can read it here. Let me just try to hide this. So yeah, so the steps are, as you can see, the scenario and the step, for example, is in English language. So Cucumber helps you build such reports which are user friendly and very easy to use and very comprehensive. So reporting, I would say, is pretty much one's personal choice how you want to generate your reports and how you want to publish them. And whatever you've built into Java automation framework, that can be reused here as well. So I think that pretty much covers all the points I wanted to talk about in this session. And I would be open to questions now.
Thank you so much for very detailed presentation. It's actually interesting because I heard about this framework, but I personally didn't work on it. I work on WebDriver IO framework, which is looking pretty much similar to this, but slightly different. I was wondering, I would assume you moved from Java to this framework, right? And
Right.
as far as I know, a lot of people are fans of Java and a lot of people are fans of JavaScript. For me personally, I find JavaScript more fast in case, like not in running the test, but at least writing the test, which is also important. Is there any other like very major benefits apart of what you was presenting you found also in this framework? Just curious because it's always important to convince people to move out from Java sometimes, but it's hard sometimes, the standard benefits is not enough. So I was wondering if there are, maybe you found some more of them.
Absolutely. See, I would say if somebody is automating an Angular JS application using Java-based automation framework, along with Selenium, definitely they would have a very tough life, because they would have to do a lot of handlings and every now and then. Whereas for somebody who's using Protractor, they would have a pretty much easy life wherein they don't have to worry much about inbuilt, the internal handling of promises of asynchronous JavaScript code. So I think that's a pretty much major reason, and it is actually the reason for me wherein I shift from Java based automation framework to a JavaScript framework, because I didn't want that struggle to be there all the time, especially when we know that AngularJS is going to be our future language, and all our web applications are going to be built on top of that. And moreover, as far as speed is concerned, now JavaScript versions, which is nowadays called as modern JavaScript, is pretty much fast, and it's coming at par with Java. Though I won't say comparable. I mean completely at par, but yes, it's actually getting better now. So
Nice, thank you. And so one more question from me. What about mobile automation? Does Protractor also covers that part? And is it as good as you do the same in, let's say, Java-based framework? In case you worked on it, I was just wondering.
yeah, sure. To be honest, I use Java-based framework for mobile native application automation, and I found that stable so far. So I don't have any plans of switching on to Protractor for that as
Okay.
of now. Yeah, and I'm not even sure. I haven't checked the feasibility of that as well.
Okay.
So
I was just
yeah.
wondering maybe if you know, but it's fine. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Hi Neha, this is Prashant, and
Hi,
thank you for the
Krishna.
presentation. It's very nice session actually. I have a few questions regarding the protractor. So protractor is more capable for testing the AngularJS application. Uh, a question is Angular latest versions they are compatible? Protractor is more compatible with the Angular JS latest version, like Angular 10 and 11. There are recent releases, right? Just want to know,
Uh,
Protractor is okay.
Yeah, so as you know, Protractor is built by AngularJS team themselves. Um, I haven't used the latest one, but I'm pretty sure that it should be in sync with the AngularJS releases.
Okay.
So yeah, because it's built by AngularJS team itself, and they use this framework themselves for their testing purpose. So I'm sure that those are published parallelly when they're releasing out any latest AngularJS
Okay.
releases.
And is there any potential tools in available in market apart from JavaScript, like in Java or in Python? Is there any potential tool which is more relevant to Protractor? Do you find anything like you have anything like that?
Yeah, there are, I think, Cypress, and I have heard of tools which are in line to protractor lines way of working, but I haven't explored them. I guess Cypress is one of them.
Okay, thank you so much. And one more thing, like I have seen something called direct connect equal to true in the config. So
Mhm.
it's more like I just want to inform as well because this manager, protractor manager, before we used to start the Selenium in Selenium RC, we used to
Absolutely,
run the server, right? So probably I
absolutely,
think like we don't need to run the manager if we set this a direct connector equal to true.
absolutely, right.
Yeah, in case like if you want to do like a Selenium grid, want to split up the test like parallel testing, probably I think it's better ignore the direct connect. Is it right? Just I want to know like.
Right, absolutely. You're absolutely right. That's those are the options, and that's where you should use it and where you shouldn't. Yeah,
Okay, thank you. And one more last question.
sure.
Recently, like a Cucumber 5 plus versions have released. And do
Hmm.
we have support this Protractor Cucumber? This is like another JavaScript tool, right? What you are using. So, do we
Hmm.
have support, or will these guys will do this implementation in near future? Do you have any idea about it?
So Cucumber basically is not completely, I would say, in parallel releasing along with Protractor. So basically, I had combined them for my purpose of getting a better readability of my test cases, of my test scripts, I would say, automation scripts, and a better reporting structure. So, but I'm not I haven't explored the latest releases of Cucumber. If but I'm pretty sure that the support would be there for that because Protractor and Cucumber is nowadays getting famous and is being supported by communities. So,
Right. One thing I noticed is like Cucumber 5 plus the recent release, they completely changed the structure of the coding.
oh,
If we use
that,
the same thing,
mhm,
if we want to implement it in Protractor, Cucumber, this thing, the tool that we use with Protractor, I think there will be
mhm.
a problem. That's the reason I think they are delaying it. It's been like more
Okay.
than 5 months since they released this Cucumber 5 plus version public, but it
Okay.
beta version idea. I think they have to upgrade their like a library so that we can start using it.
Absolutely, yeah. If they want to keep their Protractor Cucumber Duo famous, I think they'll have to do that
Definitely.
because I am pretty much in love with this framework because once I've migrated to it, my life is a lot easier for AngularJS applications. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that's it from my side. And if anybody have to, if anybody has questions, please raise your hand so that I will open the mute. I will make it unmute.
Okay, if there are no questions, let's move to the second presenter. Thank you, Neha, again for very detailed presentation. I already want to check it out and see if
Sure.
it can
And,
help me as well, because I'm a fan of JavaScript, so I'm always happy
ah,
to explore more
great,
tools in it. Thank you so
great.
much.
That's good. And thank you so much to you as well, Alona and Prashant, for inviting me in and giving me this platform. So thank you guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Neha.
Doing a great job. Keep it up.
Thank you.
So let's move to our second presenter. Prashant, can you do the magic and give an ability to present?
Sure.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Sorry for the delay and sorry for the technical issues.
That's happening. It's happening sometimes. No problem. You see, we managed it somehow, so it's okay.
Yeah, and thank you for being so patient. I actually had to restart my Mac in order to make it work, but I'm here, so all is well now.
Good.
Yeah.
Just let us know if you can share screen, and Neha, if you can stop sharing your screen.
It says now, yeah, that host disabled
Yeah.
participant. Let me try again. Yeah. So
Sure.
I think you need to give me individual permission in order to share the screen.
Okay.
Or configure a setting there. Okay, I think.
Now you can, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I can. So can you see
Yeah.
it?
Yes. Now it's all yours, please.
Okay, thank you. And at any point, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me. I can keep this under 40 minutes, right? Or less?
Yeah, you have time. Yeah.
Okay,
Please.
so my presentation is mostly about a comparison between Selenium and Endtest. And I'm starting by introducing myself. So my name is Liviu. I'm an actual solutions architect at Endtest. I'll try to be as unbiased as possible. You'll see that we're using several criterias. I worked as a QA engineer in Europe and Asia. In Asia, more specifically in Muscat, Oman. I worked for 2 years on a government project. And in general, I'm, let's say, very passionate about Selenium and Appium and anything which involves test automation. So we're going to compare the two. We're going to look at pros and cons, and we'll also see some examples, some code, some samples, and some, let's say, data. We're doing this comparison because we always need to, let's say, to have a look at the latest tools. We always need to work smarter to get things done faster. And I think the most important reason, I feel like things have changed compared to where they were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, if somebody wanted to automate some tests, their manager would just say, okay, just use whatever you want. Use Selenium, use any framework. That's, it's your business. But now, from what we've noticed from the market, a lot of teams, a lot of departments have started adding business metrics to these automation efforts, in the sense that, okay, you choose to use that framework. In how many months will it be ready? In how many months will it deliver value? What's the ROE? So this is something that we haven't seen before, like applying project management KPIs to automation efforts. And I think that's the most important reason why we should always make sure that we choose the best option for us. Because everyone has specific needs. Everyone needs maybe a tool for their specific needs. So, like I said, we're going to use 7 criteria. I picked this criteria because I thought it would be, let's say, as objective as possible, and again, to try to avoid as much bias as I can. So the first criteria is ease of use. And in general, we're using tools more and more, and now it's easier to do a lot of things than it was a few years ago. And we should always, I believe that we should always try to use a tool which makes our life easier, because nobody wants to use a tool which makes their work or their life more difficult. So for this basic comparison of ease of use, I wanted to show you this basic sign up. It's actually from a website. I don't know who owns that website. I think it's some company. I just use it for basic sign up examples. So let's see that we have this basic sign up and we want to create a test for it with Selenium. So I'm using Python for Selenium. I've always been a fan of Python, probably for the same reason that most of you like JavaScript, because the syntax is easy and you can write a lot of things with just a few words. Maybe unlike Java, where you have to write like 100 pages of code for your hello world example. Obviously an exaggeration. So after, let's say we want to automate this with Python and Selenium. So after we set up Python and Selenium, we import whatever we need. This is the standard package that I would use. I'm not going to use all of them, but these are what I usually use in my tests. And we start the driver, the Chrome driver in this case. We add the arguments. You have a whole bunch of arguments for Chrome, for Firefox, for Internet Explorer, and these are really important because they can totally change your experience. At least for Internet Explorer, some of these options can make a huge difference in terms of speed. So after we finally configure the Chrome driver, we launch it. We do a bad practice here of using an implicit wait. I think everyone has an opinion on this. Maybe we can use explicit waits. Maybe we can combine them. It depends. This is just for the sake of the example. And then for our first step, we just go to that URL. And for the next steps, we need to identify the elements. So what's the standard practice? We perform a right click. We look for an identifier, an attribute. It has an ID, so that's really awesome. We use it, we send the keys. And we can do this for all the elements which have IDs. Just random user. Okay, and for the last button, I noticed that I don't have an ID. So we have several options. We can either get the CSS selector or the XPath. In this case, I got the XPath and I added it here. It's a bit long. I always wished Chrome would give me better XPaths based on attributes and attributes values and not on the ancestors. But I guess they know best. I just don't like long XPaths in general. So it's pretty intuitive to use Selenium. It's easy. You can understand. So it's definitely easy to use. You don't even have to be a developer, because most testers actually, they start learning to code when they start automating Selenium tests, and that's perfectly fine. Now, if I want to do the same example with Endtest. So this Endtest is not a library, actually. It's more of a cloud platform. So it's like a solution. You sign up and you start using it. And we have this Chrome extension, which you can configure, to according to your specific needs. Maybe you want to record scroll events. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to use the ID attribute, for frameworks where you have dynamic IDs. Maybe you don't. So what we have to do, we just need to add that URL, click on start recording. It takes us to that URL, and then we just start using it like a regular user. And you can see here that it detects the events that have happened. So it detects the fact that I went to that URL, that I clicked on the first name, that I wrote text. It's using the attributes. So if your element has an ID, it will use the ID. If not, it will write some kind of XPath. And you can see that this XPath looks a bit better than the one that Chrome gave me because it's shorter. It uses an attribute. If I want to add an assertion, I can just do that. Let's just save this real quick. Let's call this sign up, and the name for the test suite. And you have it here, all the steps. You can change them and so on. And if you want to run the test, you run it directly in the cloud. You select like the browser that you need on Windows, on Mac OS. So, it doesn't matter what operating system you're on because these browsers are in our cloud or mobile devices. So It's also easy to use, might be a bit easier for people who don't code, but in terms of ease of use, I wouldn't say that, it's maybe down to preferences. Maybe someone likes one option, someone likes the other. So there's no, I think, clear winner for this. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So flexibility. This is really important in general because Endtest is a codeless solution. This is one of the reasons why a few years ago developers and testers, they would not use codeless solutions because they would say it doesn't give them enough flexibility. With Selenium, it's pretty clear that you have enough flexibility. It's a programming language, and in a programming language, you have variables, if statements, you write a function, and then you use it as many times as you want, and so on. So Selenium, no one is doubting the fact that it's not flexible. So I have here let's say a flexible example where we do something a bit more complex. So this page, I think it's an interesting example. When you click on this button, a new tab will open, and these elements are inside an iframe. And we need to interact with them. So let's say that we want to automate this. If you would use something like Cypress, you could probably already go home because Cypress does not support multiple browser tabs. So you would already be stuck. With Selenium, we can see here, I wrote this example. Let me see. So with Selenium, it's easy, you just go to that URL, you find that initial button that I clicked on, and you click on it. And then you use this to switch to the next tab. And then you use this line to switch to the iframe. And once you're in the iframe, you can just, continue to identify and interact with the elements. One detail that I wish was a bit more intuitive, at least for me it wasn't when I learned this, is I didn't know with these Windows handles. It wasn't clear for me, okay, how many are there? It's like the number of existing tabs, or does it start from 0 like an index? Does it start from 1? If I change like the tabs, if I go from one tab to the other and back, do those numbers, the order of the numbers, does it change? So I always wish that was a bit more clear, or maybe I just didn't read the right documentation. Now, the same example, if I would do it with Endtest, just adding this here. So again, just using it like a regular user, click on this button, then select whatever I need here and click submit. So you can see the steps, they're also added, like the click, the switch to next tab, the switch to iframe, the select, and the click. So, the steps for interacting with browser tabs and iframes, they're added automatically. And if we save this, let's call it complex. If we do look at this, you can see that it's a bit more, just slightly bit more intuitive because, you have like switch to next tab. So, it's either the next tab or the previous tab. You don't care about the existing number of window handles, about how many items does that list have. And also I would say in terms of flexibility, those concerns that were a few years ago about not being able to use variables, if statements, and loops, Endtest and other codeless solutions, because the market is full of codeless solutions, they mostly have all of that. So, you have options to define variables and use them. You have options to do if statements and loops and reuse components. You can even, add custom steps to execute JavaScript code. So I think the flexibility, the fear that a codeless solution does not offer you flexibility might not be valid anymore. But if anyone comes up with a use case, I would definitely like to hear it. That's part of my job, to find use cases which are too complex. Okay, let's move on with the presentation. So because I mentioned flexibility, this was also the issue, because maybe a few years ago, when people wanted to use a tool, they always said, I want to use the tool that gives me the most flexibility, like the most flexibility. And if we look at this example, you have in the left machine code, and here you have Python code in the right. And the question, which one gives you the most flexibility? It's obviously the machine code, because you have ones and zeros. You can do whatever you want. You're not, let's say, restricted by anything. But that doesn't mean that you would use it, even if it has the most flexibility, because you would spend months and years to do a hello world in this one. The next one, in terms of collaboration. Now, what inspired me to do this one is I saw a video on YouTube. I think it was someone, I don't know from which company. And he was saying that, I don't know, 10 years ago or something, some salespeople were trying to sell a codeless solution in his company. I don't know which solution it was or what company is that. And he kept finding these arguments. Why should they use Selenium and not use that codeless solution? And one of his arguments was the fact that, it was a desktop tool. So everything was stored on the user's computer, and it was really difficult to collaborate. He said that he would try to put some files in a Git or SVN, but he couldn't find, the relevant files. So that was a major drawback back then, that these tools were desktop tools, and realistically speaking, you are working with colleagues. Maybe you're lucky if you're working just by yourself on your automation tests. Maybe that's a good thing sometimes. And in general, collaboration with Selenium, how would you handle it? You would need maybe an account on GitHub or something like that, or a private Git repository. You would store them there, create branches. So that's pretty much it for Selenium, and maybe some communication just to know when things have changed. With Endtest and in general with any cloud solution, collaboration becomes maybe a bit more easier, because since everything is already in the cloud, you're already working in the cloud. If you want to grant access to someone, you just maybe add them as a collaborator. Like I have here a test user, you add them here, and they have instant access to your test. So it's like having a built-in Git. And you also have options like automatic backups. So create a backup from your test each day and store it for 1 year. So if your colleague, if Batman starts deleting some steps, you can just go to a previous backup, restore it, and continue from there. So and I think this is also good for audits. If any of you had external audits at your company, if you're working with pharmaceuticals or stuff like that, these auditors, they usually say, okay, I want to see what your web application looked like on the 15th of last month, and what your automated tests look like, and what were the results. So you get your application from Git, you get the test from backup, and you look at the execution results. At least that's how it happened when I was working at the company where they had this. Okay, moving on. Cross-browser capabilities. This is interesting. One of the things that I always liked about Selenium is that it works on all major browsers. So even Internet Explorer, Safari, Edge, and it works pretty well. Personally, this is what I never liked about Cypress, the fact that, they seem to neglect the cross-browser part. So right now, the Cypress library, it doesn't work on Internet Explorer, it doesn't work on Safari, it doesn't work on mobile browsers. So I think they still have a lot of catching up to do before they, they can compare themselves to Selenium. This is an important aspect that I didn't know about, that Safari has an 18% market share. I think this is for the US, but for most of us working in, let's say, international companies, that's where a big part of the market might be. So let's see how Selenium handles cross-browser testing. And when I start working with Selenium, I wish I would have an option, instead of calling a different WebDriver, I wish I could just change a variable from Chrome to Firefox and make it happen. But it doesn't really happen like that. If I want this test to run on, let's say, Firefox, I need to get the Gecko driver. I have a completely different set of capabilities with different names. If I want to do it for Internet Explorer and Safari, that's the same. The web drivers, they're developed and maintained by the browser, let's say, owners themselves. So Safari has a built-in driver. It has some disadvantages, like with Safari, you can only run only one test per macOS machine. So with Chrome, Firefox, and the rest, you can have as many tests as you want on the same machine. Something that I found out, later about Selenium was that it's not just the WebDriver settings that you need to change, but there are scenarios where, for example, let's say we want to get the text from an element, right? This is a common scenario when you want to have assertions, you want to see if that text is correct. And something I found out that, for example, with Chrome, it's really easy. You just get the text property, straightforward. But with Safari, it's different because Safari does not have this text property. So what you need to do is you need to get the inner text attribute, which by default, I think it includes some extra characters that you need to remove. I don't know if they were like leading and trailing white spaces, but something like that. And even when you get a tag name, let's say, let's say I want to get the tag name for an element in Safari. With Chrome, it's easy. You have the tag name property, but you don't have this property in Safari. So you actually need to execute some JavaScript code that will fetch that tag name and return it to you. So it's very important when you're working with Selenium, if you want to run your tests on all browsers, don't think that you will build them while testing it in Chrome, and then one day before your release you will make it work on Firefox, Safari, and Internet Explorer, because there are all sorts of things that you need to do differently. You will have a lot of if statements: if Safari, if Firefox, if Internet Explorer. And this isn't anyone's fault. This is just something that can be improved from both the web drivers, the teams behind the web drivers, and the Selenium library. For Endtest, what we did is all of these, let's say, particularities, we handle them on our side. So for example, because we also use the web drivers, so each action that you have here, it's tested and works each and every time on all the browsers. So what happens, let's say, in the back when you have, I don't know, some action, in the back, we have like special conditions. Okay, if your test is running like on, on Safari, it will work. All of the steps that you have and you tested in Chrome, they will work. So let's say we take care of this on our side. So you somehow have the confidence that your tests that you built while testing in Chrome, they will work just as well in Internet Explorer, Firefox, Safari, Edge, as long as your web application does. Okay, let's move on. This is the implementation costs. So this is also something that I noticed a few years ago. When you're like a developer or a tester, you try most of the time to use free tools, but you're not necessarily aware that, okay, I choose a free tool, but all this time that I'm spending to do whatever I need to do at my job, it's still costing my employer money, and if I make a decision which will end up taking 6 months of my time, it might have been better to maybe pay $5 or something like that. And an example that I like to give, like, for example, this Zoom tool that we're using, right? In general, it's mostly, it has a free option, but if you want a meeting to run for more than 40 minutes, you need to pay, I think, $19 per month, right? So let's say that when you choose like a tool for maybe webinars, you would think, okay, let's look only at free tools. And if you look at free tools, you eventually come up and find this WebRTC library, which is super free, open source, developed by Google, right? And you start using it. But the problem is that, it takes a long time. You start building your own video conferencing solution. It takes 6 months. After 7 months, it's not ready. So you've already spent 6 months working on something without delivering any value. So always take that into consideration. And in general, I think this trend with free and open source is fantastic. It's great, but a lot of people don't understand it completely, because when they're asking, is this solution open source, they're not actually asking, hey, it looks interesting, I want to be a contributor, I want to see the list of issues. They're mostly asking, like, is it free or not? So, we should always use open source solutions. I personally use a lot, we use a lot, everyone uses, that makes sense. And if most of the time, or at least not most of the time, but sometimes using an open source solution might not actually make sense. And here's why: because when you're starting a test automation initiative, you have a breakdown of the costs. So what you're spending money on, you're spending money on how much you will work on those tests, right? And for example, if you pick Java instead of Python or instead of JavaScript, you will spend maybe 2 times more or 3 times more on writing that code. And, unless you're working for free, that translates into spendings for your employer. You will also need a cross-browser grid, because, you're running your tests locally on your own computer. That's okay. But eventually, you'll have to integrate your tests into a CI/CD system, and you'll want to run it there. So if your team wants to release on a weekend, they're not going to, and you're maybe on vacation, they're not going to call you and, hey, can you give us the password for your computer so you can run the tests? You need to have them somewhere remotely. You also have this effort to integrate with your CI/CD system, because your tests are okay, they're giving you results, but you need to make those results compatible with Jenkins or GitHub or GitLab, whatever you're using, and work on that pipeline. And also you need to make sure that your tests have like an endpoint, because you're starting the tests from that Jenkins, and they need to somehow, that step in Jenkins needs to call your test. And also training other colleagues, because again, you will have new colleagues who will join your team maybe, and for this, the breakdown of costs, this is up to you and you only to calculate. So, and it's available, for any test automation solution, even if it's like a library, even if it's a cloud platform, if it's a cross-browser grid, you need to calculate and see exactly. Maybe sometimes picking something that costs $5 might be a better investment than something that costs $0. Okay, end-to-end capabilities. This end-to-end thing has become quite a buzzword in the last few years, from what I've noticed. Everyone's talking about it, but most of them are just using it as a buzzword, because what end-to-end means, if you look at the definitions, means, from one end to the other. So if your application, let's say you sign up, right, on this web application, and I receive an email here, right? If my test stops here, then it's not end-to-end. End-to-end means actually checking that email. And for our side, we use this mailbox service that we have, this Endtest mailbox service, where you can check the email here. And this mailbox is free for anyone to use. So it's not dependent on Endtest or on an Endtest account. So even if you're using Selenium and Python, Selenium Java, or whatever solution, you can still use Endtest mailbox. You don't have to pre-register these emails. You just generate a random input, add Endtest mail, send an email to it, and then you'll be able to access it here. And click on it or do whatever you need. The same thing for checking text messages. If your application is sending a text message and you're not testing it, it's not end-to-end testing. And if you're using some stub or some driver or some API call, that might be good enough, but it won't really give you the confidence that everything is actually working. And on our side, just because we had a lot of users asking for this, we have a functionality. We have like a real phone number. Message sent to that phone number. So I think even for my account, I can see it here as well. I have like 2 phone numbers assigned, and I can see the text messages, and I can delete them and access them automatically as well. Again, sending API requests, this depends. Maybe you're sending an API request to insert some data or something like that, or to clear some data. We also added this on our side because it was requested a lot. Like, you have this action, send API request, and you can have the type of request, how many params you want, authorization, headers, response. You can save the response in variables. And I was discussing with a user a few days ago, and he had a use case where he wanted to extract information from a Google Sheets document. So he was using the Google Sheets API and this API request, and it was giving him like a super large JSON object. So he chained together several API requests like this one in Endtest. From that JSON, he extracted an array. From that array, he got another JSON. And from that JSON, he finally got his value. So chaining together, just like you do in Postman or other API solutions. And executing SQL queries. Again, this might be good for preparing data, deleting data, connect to a database, execute SQL query. Maybe you're clearing your data after, I don't know, after a test. Okay, moving on. Reliability. This is an interesting topic because in my first years of working, I had this impression of open source that it's reliable, because what everyone told you was that, think of it this way. It's open source, anyone can contribute, and if you ever find a defect in that library, you can just fix it. And this is one of the reasons why, open source solutions, some companies, when they use them, they don't even do like an audit on them or something like that, because some people think that, okay, it will be fixed all the time. So many contributors, if not, I can fix it myself. And the thing with this one, what I've noticed is that it's pretty difficult to actually become a contributor to be accepted as one. And even if you would be accepted, the thing is that, we barely have time, to work on our own stuff in our day-to-day schedules. We probably won't have time to learn the entire open source framework and fix a bug in a way that gets approved by the other contributors. So this boils down to that question, who's going to fix that bug? And in my experience with Selenium, because in the previous years I did work a lot with Selenium, if there was a bug, you would look for a workaround, you would try a previous version and spend hours on Stack Overflow. This is something that we try to improve on our side, because we obviously test it a lot, but if a user reports a bug and it's an actual bug which affects functionality, we try to fix it in 24 hours. So a user, they don't need to look on forums to change versions. They just report the bug, and the devs on our side, they fix it. So because I had situations a few years ago where I had my tests, and then at some point it didn't work because of some external library that got updated, and I had to dig around to see how to install the previous version of that library. And I think since then I developed like a fear of updates. I'm very skeptical of updates, which is not a good thing. And again, either use open source solution or a vendor solution. It boils down to community or support. And there's no, because you have different solutions. For some solutions, the community might be fantastic and helpful. For others, they might not help you so much. For private companies, for vendors, the support might be great, and sometimes it might be awful. It's always good to check when you're asking a question in the community, because most communities, if you really dig around them, like for Selenium, for I don't know, for Cucumber, and for others, most of the time in those communities you will see people from different companies who are like planted there, and they always answer the question, and they have like almost an agenda. So I think I noticed this actually for Cypress. If you go to their forums or their chats or anything, and you maybe ask something like, hey, is it okay if it doesn't work on Internet Explorer? And you will immediately get a response from someone, yeah, it's okay, because there's no need to test on Internet Explorer. Most applications are using polyfills nowadays, something like that. And if you then look up that person, you will see that they actually work there. So, it's always good to do some investigation when you get an answer or a proposition or anything like that, just to check if there isn't anything suspicious there. Now, for this was a bug for Selenium. I know if you ever encountered it, it bothered me a long time, like timed out a receiving message from a renderer. And I traced the history here because it happened, I don't know, in some scenarios, but in some it didn't, as it didn't depend. I configured my page load timeout accordingly. I configured my element load timeout and so on. And this error first appeared like in 2015, timed out receiving message from renderer. And then I followed it, and in 2018, it still wasn't fixed, or it seemed like it was fixed in some versions of the Chrome driver, and then it would appear again. And users, they came up with workarounds, like add this capability, disable sandbox mode, disable that, disable this. And actually sandbox mode is not here, but I saw it once, and actually disabling sandbox mode for Chrome might be a security problem. Sandbox mode is what makes something from a tab not being able to interact with anything from a different tab. So, in 2019, 4 years later, people were still talking about workarounds. For some, it was working for them. For some, it wasn't. And in 2020, someone reported the bug again. So the same bug after 5 years. And I'm still following that bug. I noticed that a fix was pushed, and I wanted to check it out. But after that, I saw another comment from a person that said it's still reproducible on their end, and I wanted to see on my end. So this is also something that I think you should take into consideration, that that perspective that, hey, it's open source, someone will fix it, or I can fix it. It doesn't always happen like that. And I'm not saying that open source options are bad. I'm not saying that vendor solutions are good or, the opposite. I'm just, in general, I learned to look a lot at all the details, all the planning, all the implementation, because at least for my side, maybe nowadays I'm not deciding if I want to use Selenium or not, but I'm deciding for other libraries, for other solutions. And we always have to calculate, like, okay, it's open source, it's free, but does it make sense? For example, recently, we have this option to, let's see, to extract value from an image, to extract the text from an image with OCR. OCR stands for optical character recognition. And this is useful, maybe, I don't know, maybe you have some website which is generating logos, right? And you're entering the keyword Toyota there, and you want to see that the logos generated actually contain that keyword. And you don't know what logos will be generated, so you cannot do screenshot comparison. So you would have to use some OCR. And getting to my point, this OCR, we looked at libraries, and there are plenty of libraries for like PyTesseract and most Tesseract-based libraries. But the thing was that, those libraries, they work great when your text is big, a big, dark text on a completely white page. They work perfectly. But if not, you have to do a lot of changes to it. You have to increase the contrast. You have to align it. You have to increase the sharpness just a bit, but not too much. So, and our developers, they never actually reach the stage where, okay, after a few days of tweaking it to get really good results. So instead of this, we decided to use a service, an online service from Amazon. It's called AWS Recognition. And it costs us, I think, I don't know, $10 per month or something like that for the number of requests that we have. And it does a perfect job. And, it took us maybe 20 minutes to implement it on our side instead of a few weeks. So this was the scenario for me. If I would have been, if I would have said, no, I want to use open source, I use only open source, I don't want to see anything else, I would have caused my team to consume a lot of time and in the end, consume a lot of resources. That's actually pretty much it from my side. So again, I avoided to talk too much about Endtest because I work there. I don't want to make it look like, I'm biased. Obviously, I am biased. It would be impossible to not be because I work there. But I just tried to show you some of the things that I found throughout the years by comparing them and, comparing the experience.
Thank you so much for your presentation. There is something with connection probably. Okay, now I hear you. I've got a lot of questions, so maybe I will ask a few of them.
Okay.
Because recently, not recently, maybe a few months ago, I was doing some POCs mainly on open source tools, of course, but also a few tools came into my mind about like vendor or whatever you call it. I don't like the word codeless, to be honest, because there is a lot of code behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But still, and I think there is a future with those tools as well, because before you were like, I was listening to your presentation, you were saying, yes, before maybe 2 years, 3 years ago, there were actually nothing much to do with those tools because you couldn't probably get some API response, or you couldn't do variables, if else, and or so on. I will be honest, I'm still having a lot of doubts about all those things, but seeing options like SMS, even the image you just explained, that to fetch the text from it, if you're not really a tester with very good development skills, and a lot of QAs don't have like super deep development skills, yeah, like let's be fair here. It will take like really a lot of time to implement whatever, as even push notifications, SMS, all this kind of things. So I feel all this innovations in vendor solutions are really cool and save pretty much a lot of time. But from the other hand, as a QA who likes to write automation tests, I feel I might be bored, like to have a vendor tool, because for me it will be very fast and I will not be really involved in coding itself. And I think a lot of other QAs have the same impression, but that's, for business, it's always better to spend less money. And you are totally right about calculating return of investments as well. The only doubt I have here is in case of complex systems, like complex web apps, or probably, I'm not sure if your tool supports mobile native apps, because we were talking about Selenium, but yeah.
It does. It's a
It
separate
does.
component.
Okay, yeah, so it does. Good. So it's like a all-in-one solution at this end. So I'm still have doubts, like in case of super crazy, kind of scenarios, like, okay, fetch some dynamic data from API, put somewhere else, do a lot of stuff. Because when we code, we can, it's about flexibility, which you mentioned as well. But when we code, we can do all this, like we can do anything basically if we have good knowledge of coding, yeah. But here, let's say, what if you pay for the tool and after some time, all good, but then you come to the point where you can't really proceed because it's not dependent on you and your coding skills, it's depending on the vendor, right? So in such cases, what do you usually do? Like, do you provide a solution for that? Or if it's impossible, what can happen in this case? Like when your client, let's call it this way, stuck and can't really proceed and he really needs to automate it. Just an example. So I was wondering what approach do you use?
That's an excellent question. So for the first part that you mentioned, for example, in your case that you like to write code, this in general, it boils down to preferences, because people in general, they like different things. And one example that I like to show is, for example, people with cars. For example, in Europe, people like to drive cars with manual transmission, and in US they like to drive with with automatic transmission. I think it's the same in the Emirates. People mostly drive for automatic with automatic transmission.
Yes.
And the thing is that if you ask, if you would go back in time and ask someone, hey, do you think all of the people would prefer automatic transmission? They would say, yeah, normally. But realistically speaking, whenever I ask people, hey, why do you want to buy a manual transmission? They would say, yeah, I need to feel the engine, I need to do this, but you're not a race driver. But people like what they like, and that's perfectly fine. That's how things are. Nobody wants to calculate the ROE for changing gears or something like that. And for example, in your case, even if you would decide, okay, Endtest has a better ROE, and you would use it, if you wouldn't enjoy using it, you wouldn't work so much, you'd probably get bored, and in the end, you wouldn't be so productive. So it's not just about ROE, it's about also what you like. And what you asked about that flexibility, that's an interesting question. And this is something that we analyzed for a long time. And for example, that flexibility that you mentioned in coding, if you look at the components, that flexibility is just using, you can split that, let's say, flexible scenario that you coded into little pieces. So for example, in one piece you assign the variable, in the other you started a loop. In that loop, you have a few steps. You call an API request, you fetch this, you fetch that. So if you look at it, you have, a functionality and then another, because a complex scenario is built out of, small actions. And what we did on our side, we made sure as much as we could that, you have all of those components. So like doing loops and getting data from CSV files, if statements, variables. You even have like a thing called the Endtest vault, where you can store a value. Let's say you sign up with a user on your website and you get this dynamic ID. you store it in the Endtest vault, and then when you run another test, maybe tomorrow or after 2 weeks, you can fetch it from that Endtest vault and use it. And in general, users, they always come, asking about, hey, I have this scenario, and we show them how to do it. And I think we haven't had any situations like this, but the last one we had it maybe 1 year ago where, okay, you can't really do that. Let us implement something, and we put it as a priority. So each time a user comes up and says, hey, I can't do this, I have this scenario, we show them a solution which is, also easy to use, because if we tell them, yeah, you need to, I don't know, do some super complex stuff and use that external service, it's not really solving the problem. And if today, a user would come and they would ask us that, we would do our best to implement, because you can imagine it's almost embarrassing for a vendor. A user pays, they put their trust in you, and they have a scenario where that tool is not useful. It's like, it would look really bad for any vendor.
Yeah, makes sense. And what about CI/CD? Maybe I missed it, sorry, but Endtest, like when you, let's say in our scenarios in open source or whatever tools, we just store our code in repository connected to Jenkins or Azure or whatever CI we use, and that's how it goes. Like after each commit, how CI/CD process goes. So is it something possible with Endtest as well? Like how does it interact with popular CI tools?
So the basic idea of this for CI/CD, for some solutions, we have like built-in integrations for Jira, GitHub. For others, we have like chapters here, how to do integrations. And what this means is mostly, so you can see most of the solutions, but you can actually integrate it with any external solution, because let's think of it this way. External solutions, they communicate by APIs and webhooks. So with Endtest, you have like an API, let's say you want to run this test, you have this API request here. And this is a standard GET request. You just put it in Jenkins, GitHub, GitLab, whatever you're using, and this starts the test execution. It replies to you with a unique hash, which is used to identify that test execution. And there are several API requests, like, so like the one for starting a test execution, then you can fetch the results for that test execution. You even have here a sample shell script if you're using shell for the Jenkins scripting part. And you can also get like different items. You can stop a test execution with the API, and you can also upload a file in the drive, in our drive. This is mostly for mobile apps because you want to upload it. So and also, webhook notifications are standard because in the notifications area, you have notifications on email, on Slack, and on webhooks. And you can add here your webhook URL endpoint. And basically, let's see here, we send to that endpoint when your test is finished, we send a post request, which contains the name, the hash, configuration, how many passed, failed, and so on, and even the URL of the video recording.
Wow. So it basically contains all necessary information, and it can run on any most used CI tools, I would assume.
Yeah, because realistically speaking, nowadays, if a testing tool would not be able to, to integrate it, if you can't integrate it in a CI/CD, no one will use it, because most
exactly
are using CI/CD.
Okay. And what about cloud? Do you have your own, like some devices where you can run your tests, or you just, there is a possibility to integrate with like BrowserStack, SourceLab, and all this kind of cloud providers?
So for the web tests, by web tests, I mean anything that runs in a browser. So it can be a desktop browser. We have our own cross-browser cloud, so you don't need any BrowserStack, SourceLabs, Lambda test, or anything like that. So you can choose like Windows, browsers on Windows, browsers on Mac OS, right? And also the mobile devices, and iOS devices. Right now, and you don't need anything for this. The only place where you do need an external grid for now is the part for mobile tests, where you test mobile apps. And we want to launch our own mobile device lab in January. But until then, users, they connect to external grids such as browser stacks, source labs, or T-systems.
So it's possible still, right? So
yeah. So at least for mobile, we can also integrate it with web, but since we have our own cross-browser cloud, there's no need to. And you add your browser stack credentials for the mobile, and then you have it here. It starts on browser stack. The test is executed on browser stack, and you get the logs here in Endtest.
But you are planning to release your own, like for web, but for mobile, correct?
Yeah, for web, we already have it. We already have the devices and the browsers and the desktops. And we plan to add it for, for the mobile tests as well. And just to run this test to see what happens. So you select whatever you want. I'll leave Chrome on Windows. You select the geolocation. This is done for proxies because obviously you don't have all the machines in all these spaces. You have proxies.
Yeah.
You click on run. And what happens, because you're familiar with code, you can, let's say, understand what happens when you click on that button. Those codeless instructions, they're converted into Python and Selenium code, and they're sent to that machine where they're being executed. So, and in general, it's not, we don't use headless browsers because we think it's a bad practice. They might not be 100% relevant. So a real browser starts on that Windows machine and you get the logs whenever it finishes in 20 seconds or something like that.
So basically, when you want to fix something in test, as example, when it relates to the test, you just do this UI thing here or re-record it, right? Let's say if something changes, or as example, if selector, locator, whatever you call it, changed on websites or for the element.
So if something changed, you would see here an arrow with red. You'd click on the pencil icon next to that step, and it would take you to that step, and you would replace the locator here, with whatever you want. Or you can record it. You have also this self-healing option and so on. There are, in general, we try to provide multiple solutions for each possible problem.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's actually a powerful tool. At least it looks like. I didn't use it, so I cannot be 100% sure, but yeah, it's interesting alternative to open source stuff nowadays, I think.
Yeah, it's not like it can replace open source, but what we like to say is that, Selenium is like a component. You can use Selenium, but it's a library. You still need to come up with the browsers, with the Git.
You need to combine a lot of stuff together.
Yeah. So we just, take it off the user and help. And there are other solutions as well. I mean, there's Testim, there's Testgraph, Mabel, Functionize, Catalon. I can list 20 tools, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah, there are a lot now, but it's always good to see what is suitable for the project. And that's how we choose. Okay, I think from my side, I don't have any questions. Guys, does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Livy. This is Prashant.
Hi.
Thank you for the session, and it's a wonderful session. I still have questions. Most of the questions that Alona asked. Following that, I have a few questions that you have mentioned that mobile tests are possible in this Endtest. So is it like a web-based mobile test or is it native test?
So both are supported. So if you're talking about testing a website, just opening in a mobile browser, you would still need to use the web test. You just click on run and select, whatever device you need, and your test will run on that device. If you're talking about native or hybrid mobile apps, this is a separate component where, you first upload your app here. It's either an APK for Android, right, or an IPA for iOS. And after you upload it here, you can start recording a test. And this recorder works, I won't show it now, but there are details. It works by, it sends the app to browser stack, and then it sends your live feed, and it records your steps and so on.
So you mean like once APK, IPA or APK file is uploaded, we can do the inspect and find locators from your Endtest UI itself, or it's like
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, you can do it here. You start the recording process, and you have like, you will get the preview of the app, and you select like what actions you want: single tap, double tap, hide keyboard, write text. And
Okay.
after they're recorded, you have them here, and you have obviously mobile specific like actions such as single tap, double tap, flick,
Yep.
and you have mobile specific locators like accessibility ID and even coordinates as a last resort.
Okay, makes sense. And one more question, like if I say CI, I wanted to automatically pick the IPA file once it's generated. So how it's like is there any CLI commands where we can push it from our local machine? Is there any feature for
Yeah. So how it works is, how that flow would work is, you would use the Endtest API, and your file will be on some kind of, I don't know, computer disk machine server. So you use our API to send a curl request, a post request with curl,
very nice.
and you give the local path of the file, right? And you give your Endtest API credentials
Okay,
and the visibility, and then we reply with that API request. We reply with the path of the file, right? So the download path, and
okay,
that download path, you add it in your script automatically, like you
okay.
save it in a variable to the API request for starting a test execution. So you would be able to test the latest build of your app without any manual intervention.
Okay, it makes sense.
Mhm.
And is it like parallel testing is possible in this mobile automation, native mobile automation?
Yeah, it's possible, but for now, it depends on what limits you have on browser stack. Because if you connected to your browser stack account, like I did here,
Mhm.
uh, I have a trial account on browser stack anyway. You will have a limit for the parallel, right? You'll have like 2 or 3. So at least for the mobile, we give you 6 parallel by default. But if browser stack only allows you to do 2, you will
Okay.
have only 2 for mobile. But when
Uh,
we do release our own mobile device lab, there won't be any limit like that, or
okay.
at least we don't
Basically,
think so.
basically, you are letting us to connect browser stack to do the parallel testing, right? Like
Yeah.
middleman.
For mobile, for web, we have our own
Okay,
grid.
then it makes sense. I thought of I was thinking like how we can connect our VPN with the Intest. So it makes sense. Like we have to connect browser stack. There is an app to connect browser stack local. Uh,
Yeah, if you're talking about mobile tests, yeah, because the devices are on browser stack. But if you're talking about web tests and you want like your tests to reach your staging environment or your dev environment, you have like multiple ways to do it, with whitelisting or tunneling or export and so on. So,
okay, it makes sense. This is what I thought of asking. And one more thing, like how you handle the weights in Intest, like
oh, that's an excellent question. So, like I said, Endtest is using the web drivers, so it's
okay,
so you have the weights here. You configure them, like the page load timeout, you configure it, and the element load timeout. And this
okay.
means, how long should we wait for your page to load before we give up. You can add, any
So,
support.
so, so if I need to expect some visibility present, these things, you have the APIs in Intest, or you just, yeah, I mean, like you have it, right? Like a keyword, you may have it, right? Or
No, not really, because what happens is when the steps are executed, like let's say this one, right? When this is happening,
Mhm.
it's automatic. It will automatically do wait for element to be present,
Okay,
and the amount that it will wait is determined by that element load timeout value that I just showed you. So you know
okay,
how Selenium works, that when it
right.
waits for an element, it looks for it once every 100 milliseconds, and if it passes the load timeout, it gives up. It says element not found. So the same thing here.
Right. Makes sense. And one more question, Levi, the data-driven test, let's say like a Cucumber framework, if you see there is a table, right? Like
Mhm.
we keep on take the data and loop it throughout the steps. So how you handle this here?
So the default option is, and we actually have a chapter for this.
Okay.
Let me see where it was, data-driven testing, where in this chapter we show you how you can upload a CSV file and create a loop, because you can create a loop by using the action to import the test case multiple times. And in that loop, you can access all the lines, and let's say you want to log in with 100 different users and passwords, you can do that. That's one option. Another option, like I mentioned earlier, is that a user wanted to do with Google Sheets API. So he has a test case which extracts a value, and then he loops that test case to get all the values from that sheet one by one.
Right. Makes sense. And it's a open question. Like, do you find any disadvantages in Endtest?
Could you please repeat that?
Yeah, it's like an open question I'm asking. Like, is there any disadvantages, like negatives in the tool that you find so far?
Yeah, we find them all the time because we try to fix them. The first one and the biggest one is that it's not free. It costs like $138 per month for a team. So
Okay.
that's the main disadvantage, that it will cost money. I mean, back when I was a tester, I would have never paid for a tool. You could have threatened me with a knife. I wouldn't have paid $5 for a tool. That was who I was back then.
Okay.
That's one disadvantage. Another disadvantage is, that you have support, which is really nice. They're nice people. They're very technical, but
Okay.
you don't have community. So you don't find, that support person. They will tell you, okay, you can do it like this. But on a community like Stack Overflow, you find 5 different answers for every problem. So I think that's a disadvantage.
Okay. Makes sense. And let's say if I want to increase a parallel testing, like 64 browsers at the same time, and at this case, uh, actually we need to get browser stack access with like a good capacity to scale up, right?
No,
In
so
that case,
just to avoid any confusion, like I said, if you're talking about testing websites, you don't need any browser stack, you don't need any source labs, because we provide the browsers from our side. They are on machines or infrastructures. You don't depend on browser stack for the web tests.
okay.
You only need it for mobile applications. And what you mentioned about limitation, by default, we give users 6 parallel tests because that's what we determine. But there are users, companies who want more. So for each additional slot, they pay like an extra $10 per month, something like that.
Okay, makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you, Livy. And that's it from my side. I put all my questions.
Thank you as well for having me. And I did my best to not make it sound like an ad and try to be as unbiased as possible. But I'm sure at some moments, it sounded like a big ad, and I hope I didn't.
No, definitely not like that. Yeah, there are a lot of good things in this Endtest tool. Some people really like a keyword-driven kind of testing, who like a codeless testing. They don't want to code. This is preferred. Like some organizations really use it. Yeah, good to
And
know this tool. Yeah, very nice.
okay, thanks. Thank you once again for having me, and congratulations on this initiative with BugHunters. I think it's really awesome.
Oh, thanks. We are trying to share knowledge as much as we can. All right. Thanks, everyone. This session will be recorded, so you can still watch it again in our YouTube channel if you missed something or you want to just maybe repeat or just share with friends. So yeah, really thank you.
Alona, I dropped the link over there. I think only Mohammed is left. It's late. So
Yeah.
if he needs to leave the feedback, Mohammed, please go to that link and then give your feedback, genuine feedback. We would love to hear that. Yep.
Thank you so much, guys. Have a good evening or
You too.
night. Depends on
Bye-bye.
the time. Bye.
Yeah, good night.